Help me, please. Room number 7. Detective Jack Robichaud nearly dropped the fish fillet he was preparing for dinner. The voice came through the open window of his cabin in the Louisiana bayous. Female, terrified, desperate. Exactly the same voice he had heard 10 years ago in Sarah Delacroix's last phone call before she vanished without a trace. But this was impossible. Sarah was dead. Had to be dead. The case was closed due to lack of evidence, and Jack had retired, unable to bear his failure. Room number 7. Don't leave me. Jack's heart beat faster. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch of his house on stilts. The swamp around looked as always, dark water reflecting the moon, silhouettes of cypress trees rising like ghosts. But the sound repeated again, somewhere to the right, where old smuggling trails cut through the impenetrable thickets. At 58, Jack thought he had left police life behind forever. After 30 years of service with the New Orleans Police Department, after hundreds of solved cases, it was one unsolved case that broke him. The Sarah Delacroix case, a 28-year-old journalist who was investigating corruption in the city council and disappeared one evening, leaving only a broken phone and drops of blood on her front steps. Jack took his old revolver, a habit he could never break, and stepped into the water. His boat was tied to the pier, the motor always ready. Within 10 minutes, he was quietly navigating between the cypress trees, listening to every sound. Please help, room number 7. Now he could hear it clearer. The voice came from dense thickets ahead, where even moonlight couldn't penetrate through the curtains of Spanish moss. Jack turned off the motor and took the oars, moving silently. Suddenly shots rang out. 1, 2, 3. Men's shouts, cursing, the sound of boat engines revving up. Jack instinctively ducked and swam to shore, where he could hide behind a fallen tree. A few minutes later, 2 boats with spotlights raced past him. Jack managed to see the faces: a thin guy with a tattoo on his neck and a big man in a red baseball cap. Drug smugglers, probably. The Louisiana bayous had always been their favorite route. When the sound of engines faded in the distance, Jack heard something else: weak flapping of wings and quiet moaning. He directed his flashlight in that direction and saw something incredible. On a low cypress branch, its wing tangled in a fishing net, hung a huge scarlet macaw. The parrot was injured, blood was dripping from its left wing, and its right wing trembled with pain and fatigue. Help me, please. Jack froze. The parrot was speaking. The voice was an exact copy of a female voice, timbre, intonation, even the slight New Orleans accent. The same intonation he remembered from Sarah Delacroix's phone recordings. Jack carefully swam closer. The parrot looked at him with bright yellow eyes, full of pain and fear. The net was tangled so that the bird couldn't free itself. Hey, buddy, I'll get you out, Jack whispered, taking a folding knife from his pocket. Just don't move. He carefully cut the net, supporting the parrot with his other hand. The bird was heavier than he expected, at least 4 pounds of pure muscle and feathers. When the last string was cut, the parrot weakly flapped its wings and settled on the bottom of the boat. Room number 7, don't leave me, sounded again, but now quieter, as if the parrot was losing strength. Jack felt chills run down his spine. These words, this voice, it couldn't be a coincidence. 10 years ago, in Sarah's last call, she had mentioned room number 7. The police had searched every hotel, motel, and office building within 100 miles of New Orleans. Nowhere was there a room number 7 that matched the description. Now, looking at the injured parrot, Jack realized maybe they had been looking in the wrong place. He wrapped the bird in his shirt and carefully placed it on the bottom of the boat. The injured wing needed immediate medical attention, but the nearest veterinarian was an hour's drive away. Jack's cabin was equipped with a basic first aid kit. Over the years of living in the swamp, he had learned to treat various injuries. Returning home, Jack couldn't shake the thought: what if this parrot knew something about Sarah Delacroix? What if the smugglers he rescued it from were connected to the old case? Hang on, buddy, he muttered, speeding up the motor. You and I have a lot to talk about. The parrot opened one yellow eye and quietly said, Jack, Detective Jack, find me. Jack almost lost control of the boat. Sarah knew his name. She had called him by name that last night. and now this parrot was repeating her words, as if delivering a message from the past. Whoever had taught this bird to speak knew much more than it seemed at first glance. Jack carefully carried the injured parrot into his cabin. The old wooden building on stilts creaked under the weight, and the wind from the swamp brought the scent of tropical flowers and rotting vegetation. In the corner of the room stood an old writing desk, cluttered with yellowed case, files he could never forget. The bird lay on a soft towel, its breathing shallow and rapid. Jack cleaned the wound with warm water and applied a bandage to the damaged wing. Over years of solitary living, he had learned basic veterinary skills. In the swamps, help was always far away. "Easy there, buddy," he muttered as the parrot weakly flapped its healthy wing. "You're safe now." Suddenly the bird opened its eyes and stared piercingly at Jack. "Dr. Morgan. He knows. Hotel basement." Jack froze with the bandage in his hands. Dr. Morgan? That name was familiar. Robert Morgan, the city coroner who had worked with the department during Sarah's case investigation. But what did he have to do with the hotel basement? The parrot spoke again, this time in a different voice, male rough. She knew too much. Should have stopped her earlier. Jack's heart raced. These weren't just random phrases. Someone had taught this bird to repeat conversations. Conversations about Sarah. Jack sat down heavily in his chair, staring at the bird. In 30 years of police work, he had seen his share of unusual evidence. But this was something entirely different. A parrot as a witness? It sounded insane. Yet the bird knew details that were never released to the public. He reached for his old laptop, a relic from his detective days that still worked despite its age. His fingers trembled as he typed Robert Morgan Coroner New Orleans into the search engine. The first results were familiar. Official obituaries, professional achievements, retirement notices from 5 years ago. But then Jack found something odd. 3 months after Sarah's disappearance, Dr. Morgan had suddenly sold his house in the Garden District and moved to a remote property outside the city. The sale price was significantly below market value, suggesting urgency. The parrot stirred on the towel and spoke again, this time in Sarah's voice. "The records are in the basement, room 7. They're keeping the evidence there." Jack's blood ran cold. Room 7 wasn't in a hotel at all. It was in a basement. But whose basement? He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. After 4 rings, a gruff voice answered. Marcus Williams. "Marcus, it's Jack Robichaud." A pause. "Jack, hell, I thought you disappeared into those swamps for good. What's going on?" Marcus had been Jack's partner for the last 5 years before retirement. If anyone would remember the details of Sarah's case, it would be him. "I need you to check something for me. Do you remember Dr. Morgan from the Delacroix case?" "The coroner? Yeah, weird guy. Why? Did he have any property with a basement? Maybe somewhere he could store things?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's a strange question, Jack. You know something I don't." Jack looked at the parrot, who was now watching him with intelligent yellow eyes. "Maybe. Can you check the property records?" "Give me an hour." "But Jack, this better not be one of your crazy theories again." After hanging up, Jack sat in silence, listening to the night sounds of the swamp. Crickets chirped, something splashed in the water outside, and the parrot occasionally made soft clicking sounds with its beak. Then the bird spoke in yet another voice, elderly, authoritative. "The girl was getting too close to the truth about the medical examinations. We had to eliminate the problem." Jack's hand shook as he wrote down every word. Medical examinations? What medical examinations? Sarah had been investigating city council corruption, not medical fraud. The parrot continued. "Room 7, she's still there, still waiting." "Still there?" Jack whispered. "What do you mean, still there?" The bird tilted its head and made a soft whistling sound, as if trying to remember something. Then it spoke in Sarah's terrified voice. "They're coming back. Hide the recordings, room 7, behind the false wall." Jack stood up, so quickly his chair fell backward. Recordings? Sarah had mentioned recordings in her last call, but the police never found any recording equipment in her apartment or office. His phone rang. "Marcus." "Jack, you sitting down? I found something about Morgan's property. He bought a defunct medical clinic outside Lafourche Parish in 2010. Place was built in the 1940s. Used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium. According to the blueprints, it has an extensive basement level with multiple rooms. How many rooms? Looks like, let me count, 9 rooms total. They're numbered 1 through 9. Jack's blood turned to ice. Room 7. What? Nothing. What's the address? Marcus gave him the address, then added, Jack, what the hell is this about? That place has been abandoned for years. Maybe not as abandoned as we thought, Jack muttered. Thanks, Marcus. I owe you one. After hanging up, Jack looked at the parrot, who was now sitting upright, looking much stronger despite its bandaged wing. You know where she is, don't you? Jack asked softly. The parrot fixed him with its bright yellow gaze and spoke one more time in Sarah's voice, clear and desperate. Jack, please, don't let them win room 7. I'm still here. Jack reached for his revolver and checked the ammunition. After 10 years, he was finally going to get answers. Dawn was breaking over the Louisiana bayous as Jack loaded his boat with supplies. The parrot, whom he had decided to call Witness, sat in a travel cage, looking alert despite its bandaged wing. Jack couldn't leave the bird behind. It was his only connection to Sarah and whatever truth lay hidden in that abandoned clinic. You ready for this, Witness? Jack asked, checking his revolver one more time. The parrot tilted its head and spoke softly. Room 7, she's waiting. Jack steered his boat through the winding channels toward the main road, where he had parked his old pickup truck. The drive to Lafourche Parish would take 2 hours, but every mile felt like a step back in time toward the case that had haunted him for a decade. The abandoned clinic sat at the end of a cracked asphalt road, surrounded by overgrown vegetation and rusted chain-link fencing. Once, this place had been a beacon of hope for tuberculosis patients in the 1940s. Now it looked like something from a nightmare: broken windows, peeling paint, and vines crawling up the walls like skeletal fingers. Jack parked behind a cluster of dead cypress trees, keeping his truck hidden from the main road. He grabbed his flashlight, lockpicks, and the cage with Witness. Dr. Morgan, he comes at night. The parrot whispered as they approached the building. Jack's skin crawled. If the parrot was right, they might not be alone for long. The front entrance was chained shut, but Jack found a side window with broken glass. He carefully climbed through, then passed the cage to himself before following. The interior smelled of mold, decay, and something else, something chemical that made his nose burn. Old medical equipment lay scattered across the floors. Rusted gurneys, broken 4 stands, and filing cabinets with their drawers pulled out and contents strewn about. But it was the footprints in the dust that caught Jack's attention. Fresh footprints, less than a week old. Jack followed the footprints through a maze of corridors, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusty darkness. The parrot remained quiet until they reached a heavy metal door marked basement access, authorized personnel only. Down, go down. Witness whispered urgently. She's down there. The door was unlocked. Jack opened it slowly, wincing at the loud creak of old hinges. A staircase descended into complete darkness, and the chemical smell grew stronger. He could hear the faint hum of electrical equipment. Impossible in an abandoned building unless someone was paying for power. Step by step, Jack descended into the basement. His flashlight revealed a long corridor with numbered doors on both sides. The walls were newer than the rest of the building, as if this level had been renovated recently. Room 1, empty, except for a metal examination table with leather restraints. Room 2, filing cabinets full of medical records dating back decades. Room 3, modern computer equipment, still warm to the touch. As Jack approached Room 4, Witness became agitated, flapping its good wing and making distressed sounds. Not there, not there, the parrot said in Sarah's frightened voice. Room 7, hurry. But Jack heard something that made him freeze. The distant sound of car engines approaching the clinic. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Someone was coming, and they wouldn't be happy to find an intruder. Witness, we need to move, Jack whispered, quickening his pace down the corridor. Room 5, medical supplies and surgical instruments, some with dark stains. Room 6, empty, but the walls were covered with photographs. As Jack's flashlight swept across them, his blood ran cold. Dozens of pictures of young women, all looking terrified. And there, in the center, was a recent photo of Sarah Delacroix. The car engines were getting closer. Jack could hear doors slamming and voices shouting orders. They had maybe 2 minutes before the building was surrounded. Jack reached room 7 and found it locked with a heavy deadbolt. He could hear footsteps on the floor above. At least 3 people, maybe more. Using his lockpicks with shaking hands, he worked frantically at the mechanism. Jack, please." Witness spoke in Sarah's voice, more urgent than ever. The lock clicked open. Jack pushed the door, and his flashlight beam revealed a small, windowless room. But it wasn't empty. Sarah Delacroix sat chained to a hospital bed, alive but barely conscious. Her hair was gray now, her face gaunt, but her eyes, those same intelligent green eyes from her press photos, flickered with recognition when she saw him. "Jack," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "Is it really you? My God, Sarah, you're alive." Jack rushed to her side, examining the chains. "I'm getting you out of here." "The recordings," she gasped, pointing weakly to a loose floorboard. "Everything's there, the whole conspiracy, medical experiments, missing women." Jack pulled up the floorboard and found a waterproof bag containing memory cards, documents, and audio recordings. Evidence that would expose everything. Heavy footsteps echoed down the basement stairs. Multiple voices, getting closer. "There's someone down here," a man shouted. "Check every room." Jack looked around desperately. No other exit, no windows. They were trapped. Sarah gripped his arm with surprising strength. "There's a service tunnel behind the false wall," she whispered. "But Jack, they'll kill us both if they find us. You have to choose. Save the evidence or save me." The footsteps stopped outside room 7. Jack heard the familiar voice of Dr. Morgan. "Check that door. If someone's found our special patient, we have a serious problem." The door handle rattled. In seconds, they would be discovered. Jack looked at Sarah, then at the evidence that could bring down an entire criminal network, then at Witness, who sat quietly in the cage, watching everything with intelligent eyes. No choice to make. Jack whispered, breaking Sarah's chains with a surgical instrument. "We're all getting out of here." The door to room 7 burst open, just as Jack pushed aside a false panel in the back wall. Dr. Morgan stood in the doorway with 2 armed men, his face twisted with rage when he saw the empty bed and broken chains. "Where is she?" Morgan snarled, his voice echoing the same tone Witness had mimicked earlier. But Jack, Sarah, and the Parrot were already crawling through a narrow service tunnel that led deeper into the building's foundation. The tunnel was barely wide enough for one person, and Sarah was weak from years of captivity, but adrenaline kept her moving. "This way," she whispered, her voice gaining strength with each foot of freedom. "The tunnel connects to the old steam system. It comes out near the generator shed." Behind them, they could hear Morgan shouting orders. "Find them! Search every inch of this place. They can't have gone far." Witness remained remarkably calm for a bird in a cage, only occasionally making soft clicking sounds as if encouraging them forward. Jack marveled at the Parrot's intelligence. It seemed to understand they were all in this together. The tunnel opened into a larger maintenance area, filled with rusted pipes and abandoned equipment. Jack helped Sarah to her feet, noting how frail she had become. 10 years of imprisonment had taken their toll, but her eyes still burned with the determination that had made her such a formidable investigative journalist. "Jack," she gasped, "there's something you need to know about Witness. That Parrot, he's not just any bird. Morgan used him as a recording device. He trained him to memorize conversations, thinking no one would ever suspect a pet bird of being a witness." "Smart bastard," Jack muttered, looking at Witness with new respect. "How many conversations did you hear, buddy?" "Everything," Witness spoke in Sarah's voice. "Names, dates, places, the whole network." Suddenly, flashlight beams cut through the darkness behind them. Morgan's men had found the tunnel. "Move," Jack hissed, pulling Sarah toward an exit door marked with a faded radiation symbol. As they ran, Sarah quickly explained what she had discovered 10 years ago. It wasn't just city council corruption. she panted. Morgan was running illegal medical experiments on homeless women, runaways, anyone who wouldn't be missed. He was testing experimental drugs for pharmaceutical companies, using human subjects without consent. They burst through the exit door into the humid Louisiana morning. Jack's truck was 50 yards away, but between them and escape stood two more of Morgan's men, both armed. The mayor knew, Sarah continued as they crouched behind an abandoned generator. The police chief too. I had recordings of their conversations, proof of payments, everything. That's why they couldn't just kill me. They needed to know what evidence I had and where I'd hidden it. Witness suddenly squawked loudly. Kill the journalist. Make it look like an accident. In a voice Jack recognized as Mayor Richmond's distinctive southern drawl. Jesus, Jack breathed. How high does this go? Federal level, Sarah whispered. CDC officials, FDA inspectors, congressmen. The pharmaceutical money bought everyone. They've been using this clinic for 20 years, Jack. Hundreds of women have disappeared. More voices echoed from inside the building. Morgan was getting closer, and his men outside were systematically checking every hiding spot. Witness spoke again, this time in Dr. Morgan's voice. The Parrot knows too much. We should have killed it with the others when we cleaned house. Others? Jack asked. Sarah's face went pale. There were more parrots. Morgan trained a whole flock to record conversations in different locations. The mayor's office, police headquarters, pharmaceutical meetings. But something spooked him a few months ago. He killed all the other birds and destroyed most of the evidence. Except Witness escaped, Jack realized, and ended up with those smugglers. Sarah nodded. They probably had no idea what they'd found. A gunshot rang out, splintering the wood near Jack's head. They'd been spotted. Run for the truck. Jack shouted, returning fire with his revolver. He grabbed Sarah's hand in the cage with Witness, sprinting across the open ground as bullets whined past them. They reached the truck just as Morgan emerged from the building, his face red with fury. Jack threw the cage into the passenger seat, helped Sarah into the middle, and gunned the engine. Stop them. Morgan screamed. They have everything. The old pickup roared to life, tire spinning in the gravel as Jack floored the accelerator. In the rearview mirror, he saw Morgan's men jumping into two black SUVs. Where can we go? Sarah asked, clutching the bag of evidence. They have people everywhere, police, FBI, state government. I know someone, Jack said grimly, taking a hard right onto a dirt road that led deeper into the bayous. Someone who's been waiting 10 years for answers just like us. Witness spoke up from the cage. Jack, Detective Jack, trust nobody. They're all compromised. Not everybody, Jack replied, pushing the truck harder as the SUVs appeared behind them. Marcus Williams never gave up on your case, Sarah. He's been investigating on his own time, following leads the department wouldn't touch. The chase continued through winding bayou roads, with Jack using every trick he'd learned in 30 years of police work. But the SUVs were gaining ground, and his old truck wasn't built for high-speed pursuits. There, Sarah pointed to a familiar landmark. That's where you found me 10 years ago, isn't it? Where my car went into the water. Jack nodded. It was also where he'd made the decision to call Marcus Williams and arrange a meeting. If they could just reach the old boat launch, Marcus would be waiting with backup, the kind of backup that couldn't be bought or intimidated. Hold on, Jack warned as bullets shattered the rear window. This is going to get rough. Witness let out a defiant squawk and spoke in perfect clarity. The truth will come out. The truth will set us free. For the first time in 10 years, Jack allowed himself to believe those words might actually be true. The old boat launch appeared through the cypress trees, just as Jack's truck began smoking from bullet damage. Marcus Williams stood beside two unmarked police cars, along with FBI agents Jack didn't recognize. But there was something different about these federal agents. They wore the serious expressions of people who couldn't be bought. Internal Affairs. Sarah breathed with relief as she recognized the lead agent. Agent Patricia Chun. She's been investigating corruption in the pharmaceutical industry for years. Jack's truck skidded to a stop in the gravel. Behind them, the black SUVs were closing fast, but they'd run out of running room. This was where it would end, one way or another. "Marcus," Jack shouted as he helped Sarah from the truck. "We've got evidence of everything. The medical experiments, the conspiracy, all of it." Agent Chen approached with her weapon drawn, but not aimed at them. "Mr. Robichaud, Ms. Delacroix, get behind the vehicles. We've been waiting a long time for this moment." Witness squawked from his cage. Agent Chen knows. She's been watching, building the case. Chen stopped and stared at the parrot. "Did that bird just say your name?" "Yeah." Jack grinned despite the approaching danger. "Meet our star witness." Literally. The SUVs burst through the tree line, tires squealing as they tried to stop. Dr. Morgan and his men piled out, weapons raised, but found themselves facing a wall of federal agents and honest cops who'd been waiting years for this confrontation. "Robert Morgan." Agent Chen called out. "FBI, you're under arrest for kidnapping, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder." Morgan's face went white as he realized he was surrounded. "You have no evidence. No proof of anything." Witness spoke up clearly. "The girl was getting too close to the truth about the medical examinations. We had to eliminate the problem." The parrot had perfectly mimicked Morgan's voice from one of his conversations with the mayor. Morgan's men dropped their weapons as FBI agents swarmed them, but Morgan himself remained defiant. "A parrot? You think a parrot will hold up in court? That's ridiculous." Agent Chen smiled coldly. "Actually, Dr. Morgan, animal testimony has been admissible in certain circumstances since 2019. But we don't need just a bird." She held up Sarah's bag of evidence. "We have recordings, documents, financial records, and most importantly, a living victim who can testify to 10 years of imprisonment and medical torture." Witness continued speaking in different voices, each one a damning piece of evidence. Mayor Richmond discussing payments, police officials arranging cover-ups, pharmaceutical executives authorizing illegal trials. The parrot was a living, breathing recording device with perfect recall. "How long have you been planning this?" Morgan demanded, looking at Agent Chen. 3 years, she replied. "Ever since we started finding inconsistencies in medical trial data and noticed a pattern of missing women near cities where certain pharmaceutical companies were conducting research. Detective Williams contacted us 18 months ago with his suspicions about the Delacroix case." Marcus stepped forward. "I never stopped investigating, Jack. When you retired, I kept digging. Found connections between missing persons cases across 5 states, all linked to companies Morgan consulted for." Sarah, supported by a paramedic, looked at Morgan with a mixture of hatred and pity. "How many women, Robert? How many died in your experiments?" Morgan's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him as FBI agents cuffed his hands behind his back. "They were already lost," he said weakly. "Homeless, addicted, forgotten. I was trying to help humanity advance medical science by torturing innocent people," Sarah said quietly. "You stole 10 years of my life. You murdered dozens of women, and you call that advancing science?" Witness spoke one final time in Sarah's voice from 10 years ago. "The truth will come out. Justice will be served." As Morgan was loaded into the FBI vehicle, he looked back at the parrot with something like admiration. "Clever bird," he muttered. "Almost too clever." Agent Chen approached Jack as the last of the conspirators were led away. "You did good work here, Detective. The pharmaceutical executives are already lawyering up, but with this evidence and Sarah's testimony, we'll bring down the entire network." "What about the other missing women?" Jack asked. "We'll find them," Chen promised. "Every case will be reopened. Every family will get answers." 6 months later, Jack sat on his porch in the bayou, watching the sunset paint the water gold. Witness perched on a custom-built stand nearby, his wing fully healed and his vocabulary expanded to include new, happier phrases. "Beautiful evening," the parrot said in Jack's own voice, a new skill he'd picked up. "Yes, it is," Jack agreed, taking a sip of coffee. The trials had been a media sensation. Morgan received life in prison without parole, along with 14 co-conspirators, including Mayor Richmond and 2 pharmaceutical executives. 23 missing women cases were solved, bringing closure to families who had waited years for answers. Sarah had spent months in physical and psychological rehabilitation, but she was recovering. She'd started a foundation for missing persons advocacy and was writing a book about her experience. More importantly, she was alive, free, and fighting for justice in her own way. A boat motor hummed in the distance, growing closer. Jack smiled as he recognized Sarah's voice calling out, "Permission to come aboard, Detective Robichaud?" She climbed onto his dock, looking healthier than she had in months. Her hair was growing back to its natural brown, and the haunted look in her eyes was slowly being replaced by the determined spirit that had made her such a formidable journalist. "How's the book coming?" Jack asked. "Almost finished. My publisher wants to call it The Witness." "I think that's appropriate, don't you?" Witness ruffled his feathers proudly. "The truth will set you free," he said in Sarah's voice. But now the words carried hope instead of desperation. "What about you, Jack? Marcus says the FBI offered you a consulting position." Jack shook his head. "Too old for all that. I'm thinking about getting more birds, though. Witness gets lonely sometimes." As if on cue, the parrot spoke in Dr. Morgan's defeated voice. "Clever bird, almost too clever." Sarah laughed, the first genuine laugh Jack had heard from her since her rescue. "I think one talking witness is enough for this lifetime." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over the bayou. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out, and Witness answered with a perfect imitation. Jack realized that sometimes the most important cases weren't the ones you solved, but the ones that found you when you were needed most. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, "for never giving up, for believing in voices from the past." Jack nodded, reaching over to scratch Witness behind the head. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places. "Justice served," Witness said clearly, and for once, those words felt absolutely true. 1 year later, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium in New Orleans, delivering a speech at the grand opening of the Sarah Delacroix Foundation for Missing Persons. Jack sat in the front row with Witness perched on a portable stand beside him, both wearing their finest. Jack in his old dress uniform, Witness sporting a small bow tie that Sarah had insisted on. "Today, we remember not just the victims of Dr. Morgan's horrific experiments," Sarah said, her voice strong and clear, "but all the missing persons whose voices have been silenced. And we remember that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected sources." She gestured toward Witness, who squawked proudly and said, "Justice for all," in his own newly learned voice. The audience erupted in applause. In the years since the trials, Witness had become something of a celebrity, featured in documentaries and news programs about the case. But more importantly, he had helped the foundation by identifying other potential cases. His remarkable memory for voices had helped investigators connect previous recordings to unsolved disappearances. "The foundation will provide resources for families of missing persons," Sarah continued. "Advanced forensic technology, and most importantly, hope. Because if there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that we must never stop believing that the truth will find a way to speak." Later that evening, the three unlikely heroes returned to Jack's bayou cabin for a quiet celebration. Sarah had brought champagne, Jack had prepared his famous crawfish étouffée, and Witness had entertained them with his expanding repertoire of phrases, now including "Happy Birthday" in 4 different voices. As they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge over the water, Sarah raised her glass. "To second chances," she said. "To unexpected friendships," Jack added. Witness tilted his head thoughtfully, then spoke in a voice none of them had heard before, warm, gentle, unmistakably his own. "To home." Jack and Sarah looked at each other in amazement. After all this time, Witness had found his own voice. "How did you know to do that?" Sarah asked, reaching over to stroke the parrot's feathers. "Some things," Jack said quietly, "don't need to be taught. They just need to be felt." As the night deepened around them, the 3 survivors of an extraordinary ordeal sat in comfortable silence, each knowing that they had found something precious in the aftermath of darkness. A family bound not by blood, but by truth, justice, and the unshakable belief that every voice, no matter how small or unexpected, deserves to be heard. Witness spread his magnificent red wings wide, catching the moonlight, and for a moment it seemed as though he was embracing the entire bayou, protecting all the secrets and stories hidden in its depths. "The truth will set you free," he said one last time, but now the words belonged to all of them.